Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller, and our mayor, my mayor of Miami-Dade, Daniella Levine Cava. Thank you for being here, Mayor.
What a pleasure to be with you again.
And it's so nice to see you one-on-one, face-to-face. I see you all the time on TV and social media, so congratulations on your first 2 years being mayor. And a little background, 2014, you were elected the first time to the County Commission.
Yes.
Ran again in 2018, were reelected. 2 years later, you said, I want to be mayor. Yeah. After spending a lifetime as a lawyer and as a social worker and helping people that needed a lot of help. So I thank you for that. Certainly the last couple of years, Grant and I have become more sensitive to people in need and are doing our part to bringing that from the back and from the shadows of bringing it up for the conversation. My question, Mayor, is when did you know you wanted to be, number one, a politician? And then when did you say, I'm going to be mayor? Tell us that process, because there's some young people out there that are asking, how do I get to do something like that?
Oh, well, first of all, Michael, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a big fan of you and Grant, and love your newspaper and all the social media that you do as well. And the community service, you really are very, very active in promoting good things in our community. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I never planned to be a politician. It was not my life's goal. I wanted to be an elementary school principal. But along the way, I ended up going into law school and social work school and working on public policy issues, community engagement. I started a nonprofit, Catalyst Miami, that's doing great things. And eventually, after working to train people to have an active voice in public policy decisions of government and making government more accountable and responsive, I decided, yes, I needed to step inside and be someone who would be receiving the public comment, engagement, and so on. So I decided in really the end of 2013, so the very end of the year, and then filed to run in January, and then was elected in August of 2014. So being a county commissioner was extremely satisfying. There were many ways that I could change things for the community's well-being, in not just persuading others to do it. I could also help make those things happen. Of course, I had a county commission. I had to persuade them, but it passed a lot of very valuable legislation for our economy, for our environment, to help make things more equitable, things that are truly my values, lifelong values. Then after my second term being reelected, there was an opening. There was term limits, and there was an opening to be mayor. And I had realized that to really accomplish the things that I thought were most important for our community, it would make a difference to be mayor. That it was a different role. I wouldn't be voting. I'd be implementing, proposing, and overseeing 30,000 employees, a $10 billion budget.
That's with a big 10 billion.
Yes, a very, very significant piece of our economy. And so it really was something that I felt I could do, and therefore I had to do, to be able to move forward on an aggressive agenda to make sure that we could continue to thrive.
When you have the passion, it comes through, and people will buy into that. Like, this person is very passionate. They really want to get this done, and it's easier to have people come along than it is if you don't have it. So let's talk about things that you feel are important to citizens of Miami-Dade County. What are some things that are top of mind for most people?
Well, right now, housing is very big, number one. Many of us had our houses before the huge spike, but housing has always been a challenge. The cost of housing is higher relative to the salaries, which are lower compared to other places in the country. But then at the beginning of the pandemic, things were kind of stagnant. Many people were losing their jobs, businesses struggling, and housing was stable. It did not go up. But it became clear that we were opening up. People could come here and enjoy themselves. People came for pleasure and they stayed. They started moving their families, their businesses, and the demand for the existing supply of housing became just astronomical.
I saw that if I get it right, between 2021 and 2022, over 300,000 people came to the state of Florida. And we are a big part of that.
Yes, yes. Really, we're the most recovered economy in the country. So many people came here for the lifestyle. They could work remotely, so they could work from anywhere. And then they realized, well, why not bring our businesses here? And so the paradise that we've known about for a long time was discovered by many others.
And about a year or two ago, the county said for land that is in an unincorporated Dade County on the west side of US 1, we're going to help developers and help the potential of housing be put there by requiring less parking in some of those places. Tell us about that.
So, one of the ways that we can double down and build more housing that people can afford, workforce as well as affordable housing, is to build more densely along corridors, transit corridors. So, we've been able to do what we call transit oriented development, and you see it all along US 1, these bigger buildings coming up. Of course, Dadeland was one of the early adopters of this principle, and other urban centers along the corridor. This is a way that we can build with fewer parking spaces because people can rely more on public transit. And when you build fewer parking spaces, it brings down the cost as well. So it's been a kind of a win-win, and some people have resisted it because they're used to a more suburban lifestyle. But many others are young people and transplants and even retirees are all for it.
And so quite often the question is build up or out.
Yes.
And you have people on both sides of this
Yes,
issue, and a lot of
yes.
pressure, especially on the elected officials.
Mm,
So recently, the state passed new legislation that it would allow for more density in commercial property, and which would, and correct me if I misstate it, that it would allow a affordable housing unit, at least 40%, to be built at the same height as a neighboring building up to a mile away. The other requirements as far as green space and parking would have to be met, though. What's the impact on the county with that, and how does the county feel about these changes that are being brought by some Tallahassee people, and of course, obviously, people that are here? What's your take on that at this point?
yeah. Well, first of all, we don't like Tallahassee telling us that we can't make local decisions. So that's called preemption, and a lot of it has gone on, and especially this session. So that's frustrating because we feel that we could do a good job with zoning and land use decisions to best meet the needs of our residents. So we were preempted by this law, but it also brought more money, more funding for housing that is desperately needed. So, kind of a trade-off. It also eliminated impact fees for some of these projects. Impact fees is what pays for roads and water sewer lines and traffic signals and things that are really necessary, our infrastructure. So if you can't charge new development for those things, well, you have to take it out of somewhere else, out of general revenue, out of people's property taxes. So that also is very frustrating, especially to cities that strongly protested that component.
We do have a lot of more people that are moving in Miami-Dade County, and I know there's 22,000 recent kids that went in the school system. I understand it was only a net of about 7,000, but it's still a lot of people. And those 20,000 people that came in, they had, let's say, 10,000 parents or 8,000, even if it was one. That's a lot of people moving here.
Yes.
Where are they going to work? Where are they going to live? And how are they going to get enough money to pay for stuff? How does that
Yes.
all work? We're looking for the magic button.
Well, first of all, we have a very low unemployment right now. It's we're in the 2% range. So it's really the lowest in a long, long time,
Yes.
and lower than the national average by a lot. So we do have a lot of jobs. Are those jobs paying adequately to cover cost of living? Many of them not. But even if you look around at a fast food restaurant, they're not paying minimum wage. They're paying closer to a living wage, more like $14, $15 an hour. But, a salary of $30,000 does not get you very far. So households are working multiple jobs to get by. The rents have gone up and the purchase prices have gone up double and triple. It's extremely difficult for people to get by.
And so the way I'm seeing it, okay, so it's going to take 2.5 jobs in the family to be able to pay for stuff. All
Yes,
right,
maybe so.
And that came out of COVID, which was very few jobs. And so here's the
Yes,
swing side of that.
yes, for sure.
All right, so like a couple things that are important. People say to us, housing, and how do we manage the traffic, the mobility
Right,
of things? And
yes,
people,
yes.
a lot of people are tired of the traffic. I said, well, move to like someplace where we're not like one of the best counties, one of the best states in the country, and perhaps in this region. Tell us about some of the new transportation projects that might be happening to help us move around.
Yeah, it is unfortunately frustrating how long it takes. Transit is very expensive, but very necessary. It's truly infrastructure. We cannot build highways to solve our problem. We have to have better transit that people can rely upon. And we're working hard at it. We have, for the first time ever in the county budget, enough dollars allocated for the county's share of these major corridors that we are planning. It's called the SMART program. It's the South Dade Transitway with these new stations going up and new electric buses that are going to be superior to regular buses. And we expect a significant increase in ridership. We also have last mile solutions, on demand cars, connect for outside of the urban areas. The cities have freebies, and people are using those last mile solutions. So it helps people get from their home to the major transit corridor. We have the Northeast Corridor, Brightline, that's in development with a new stop at Aventura and opening up all the way to Orlando very soon. We've got the North Corridor, which is in the planning phase, an extension of Metro Rail through the neighborhoods along 27th Avenue and up to Hard Rock Stadium. And we've added express bus services in a dedicated bus lane on 836 from the Dolphin Park and Ride, where there'll be a major housing development. Many people will be riding from there, and also to a station west of FIU campus. So these are great things, but the most important thing of all is that we are adding, all of this at the same time, if you will, moving forward as aggressively as possible, but even more to come.
So the days of getting in your car and driving across the county without any traffic issues.
I forgot. This is what I wanted to tell you. Buses are really the backbone of our system, and many, many people are bus dependent. And the buses are new buses. They're many, many electric. We're going to have the largest electric fleet in the country. But also, we're increasing the frequency of the buses on the most utilized routes. This is called the Better Bus Network. And we've been hiring up drivers to be able to do this. And really, people need to try it. I heard during the gasoline crisis, after the flooding of the Port Everglades gasoline depot, that people started using transit. And guess what? They liked it.
So we know sometimes when those urgent changes have to be made, you go, okay, I can get across town. I'm not used to it, but I'll get used to it.
Yes.
And
yes.
The price of vehicle operation is huge, the most that it's ever been. So since you brought up that dreaded word flooding and rain, you're welcome.
Yeah.
So not too long ago, we had 2 or 3 days in Broward County, not 60 miles from here, where it flooded a lot of the homes, a lot of the streets, and caused the trucks not to be able to move the gasoline. Everything spiked. Not even a hurricane, all right? But lots of rain.
Yes.
So let's talk about downtown Miami, where there's a lot of people. I had breakfast down there last Sunday. It was an amazing experience. My son lives down there, and he took us out, and there we were, all types of mobility, including cars, but there were the moms with the things like this, little motor scooters, they had the little skateboards, if you will, a lot of walking going on, people all different ages. And so it was really extraordinary to see what we're doing as far as people living there. But the roads downtown get flooded pretty rapidly. What does this look like in a couple of years?
Yes. So I'm the water warrior, and I worry about everything from sea level rise to Everglades restoration and our fresh water supply, saltwater intrusion into our aquifer. And flooding. Flooding is number one. Oh, and the bay. People really understand that the bay is our blue heart, the throbbing heartbeat of our economy. We have to keep our bay clean and safe. So flooding is the F word, if you will. And we have to work collectively across our cities and our county to better coordinate the stormwater systems. You know, they need to be frequently cleaned out. We need to have better pumps and drains. In a rain event, we need people not to pry open the sewer manhole covers and flood our sewer system. So there's a lot that we're working very aggressively to address. And the city of Miami passed a special Forever Miami bond with funds to increase their resilience. And the county has done a lot too. We need to build up higher. We need to have proper drainage, many, many things that we are working
I
on.
see the Village of Palmetto Bay just received some award for fixing some flooding, and they just got a reduction in flood insurance.
Yes,
Extraordinary.
yes. Yes, Cutler Bay was really our leaders in first taking those measures to be more resilient and get their flood insurance rates reduced. And the county also has countywide, and the unincorporated has a pretty good rating, and we're going for the next level. And that is a benefit for all of our residents to bring down the cost of their insurance.
And speaking of insurance, my insurance company said, since you have an additional housing unit in the back, which we've had for 30 years, we are not going to cover you anymore come July. And I said, well, so what are you going to do with the new county ordinance that's going to allow, is it called accessory? Or
Accessory dwelling units.
I said, what are you going to do? You're
ADUs.
not going to cover any of those people? So people are really concerned about their insurance. The new requirement for the insurance companies are a lot tougher than they used to be.
Yes.
Require lots of inspections on your roof and your pipes and all this stuff.
Yes.
So continue to driving up the cost of home ownership.
Yes, indeed.
What do we do?
Yeah. So insurance is regulated through the state. And I was very frustrated that even with a special session on insurance, they basically came up with plans to allow insurance companies to reduce coverage.
Yes.
Right? That was not a solution in my book. We are working on making sure we're more resilient so people can have greater access. What you're telling me about these ADUs not being covered, that's very concerning. Sounds like an excuse to me. I don't know what the difference would be. So, certainly structures have to be insurance worthy. It's not a shed you're talking about, right?
That's a 700-foot real house.
Yes. Right. So I'm definitely going to look into that.
Right. So, and speaking of the housing, about 6 months ago, the county commission passed an ordinance that said if a existing funeral home wants to be able to have, I know it's a very tough subject, right? Be able to cremate people there, that has to have this special device to be able to do that. And a home has to be more than 250 feet away. Has there been any additional pushback to the commission?
There were some people that came down concerned about it at the time. I haven't heard anything further. Recently, I was reading that nationwide, the trend is towards cremation.
Huge.
I think it was something like 40%
It's huge.
are now using cremation.
Yep.
So obviously it's a national phenomenon.
Yes.
And we have to deal with it somewhere, somehow. But as far as I know, that is continuing.
And speaking of fires and things.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. People inquiring minds want to know. There was a fire out there in the county facility run by another organization, and it took about a week to put out the fire. The people that was where the garbage would be burnt.
Yes.
$200 million widget essentially sanitized this whole thing, reducing the garbage from 100% down to about 10%, if I remember right. And then it would be disposed of, I think, in a landfill. So it's been not operational for a while. That garbage today is being taken to a landfill at 100% not reduced anymore. I don't know how many tons a day that took care of, but a huge number. So two things. What is going to happen to that facility in the next 6 months or a year?
So inquiring minds definitely want to know. and we're working very hard to resolve the issue. So many considerations. Could we continue to use that plant, maybe on a limited basis? We're getting insurance adjusters looking at it now. Is it recoverable or not? Would you have to build from scratch? Those are considerations. It turns out that burning is actually more expensive than landfill. So that's very interesting to find out, because in the interim, we are trucking our extra garbage, which was about 40% was incinerated prior. We are trucking it to the center of the state. So we're not focusing on our own landfill, which has a more limited capacity. And we are concerned because our Community Development Master Plan, or CDMP, requires a 5-year window or capacity to be available. Or if not, there's a building moratorium. So everyone's looking at that and going, well, building moratorium, that could be very difficult for us. So we're very mindful of the capacities at the north and south landfill. So we're examining that, but we're also looking aggressively at a zero waste strategy. Okay, recycling, we haven't done so well. We could do so much better. Composting, we don't do on any kind of massive scale. There's there's different ways of dealing with waste, and we're exploring all of them.
By the way, every week I get the privilege of talking with somebody from Solid Waste Department, James Richard, Frank Calderon, and Jean Marie Massa from the recycling. I've learned more about this information. When I try to share it with my friends, they walk away. They're not interested.
No.
But we're grasping. It's a real deal. This whole thing about how to dispose of the things that we consume on a regular basis.
Well, just let me say, our first order of business is to reduce the things that we use, and then to reuse anything we can, and certainly to recycle. And then refuse is another word. There's a lot of good R words that we could use.
When I go to the drugstore, I don't need the bag.
There you go.
Actually, I don't need your receipt either, because you just sent me one. But during the pandemic, the cat and dog population was almost none because people were adopted. As the pandemic ended, a lot of people let their dogs loose. Recently, there was this huge surge of animals at the facility. A terrible situation under whatever way you measure that. What's the solution?
Yeah, it's really tragic, because not only are people letting animals loose, but they're returning them to the shelter or trying to, because sometimes they can't afford to keep them, or even their housing is not allowing them to have those pets. Or they've gone back to the office after working virtually. They can't care for the pets. So many, many reasons. So our Animal Services Department is aggressively working to help people keep their pets, whether it's providing them with food for the pet, or giving them some respite care even. We have many, many people fostering pets, taking them in short term while we look for a more permanent home. Just everything that we could possibly do. So it's really, really important that the community recognizes that these animals are here and they need our love and care, and it's so rewarding. The dogs never talk back.
And speaking of animals, there's, I believe, an ordinance concerning peacocks. A while back, the county says, if you're in a city, send us your plan, let's see what we can do.
Yes.
Have any of the cities come up with something yet? And what has happened to those peacocks?
Yes. So that was an interesting way of approaching the situation, because peacocks cannot be eradicated, right? They're protected. And so the removal plan has to be approved. I do believe that some cities have submitted plans. I can't give you an exact update about it, and I do not know how effective. But I will tell you, they're breeding very efficiently.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'll bet there is a way that those guys could be caught up and sterilized.
Interesting.
I know there's one village, a town, city, that is contemplating funding a
sterilization program for peacocks?
Yes.
Wow.
100%.
Okay,
right?
let's look into that.
Right?
I know there was discussion about birth control, and I think there was some concern about other creatures that could eat
And speaking of creatures, in one
yes.
of our local towns, um, some of the Muscovy ducks that were, um, what's the word, euthanized. Unfortunately, it was done in the public's eye, and it caught the attention of some people. And people were very upset about it. And so, in my own sarcastic way, I said, "Are you a vegetarian?" And I said, "What do you want us to do about the pythons and the alligators and the iguanas? Is it okay to do those, but not that?" Yesterday in Channel 10, 5 o'clock, a man had been feeding ducks in his front yard. Somebody came by. I don't know if if he was hired by the city, gets the ducks, puts them into his truck. The homeowner comes out, attacks the guys, tries to get the ducks out. This is an emotional issue. And the policeman told, you could get arrested for burglary. Well, they did this. The cop said, no. You tried to break into their truck, right? To get the ducks out.
I guess
So-
the ducks don't really belong to households if they're free roaming.
Yeah. So maybe that was it.
Yes,
And he
weren't
said,
there
so the
pet
point
ducks?
is that we see that those things can get very emotional.
Yes,
And
for
tell
sure.
everybody, just take a deep breath, all right, and calm down so stupid things don't happen. All right, so I understand there might be, or maybe there are some changes in Medicaid. How does that affect our kids?
I am a healthcare advocate for many, many years, and I helped to bring expansion of Medicaid to Florida back in the day and to protect our children with children's health insurance. And this is extremely upsetting. Medicaid is a very effective health insurance program. It's inexpensive compared to the benefits. And if people are not covered by insurance, then they are still getting care and it's uncompensated and it falls again to the taxpayers to cover it through general revenue when they show up in emergency rooms and so on. So people got on Medicaid during the pandemic. There were expanded options which have come to an end with the end officially of the pandemic. And I think it's really a terrible shame that in Florida we have not seen fit to expand our Medicaid coverage. Just to be clear, because people might not understand this, in Florida, to get Medicaid as an adult, you must earn below 30% of the poverty level. Okay, so we're not even talking people at the poverty level. That would be $600 per month for a family with one child. And you have to have a dependent to even be eligible. So as a single adult, you're not even eligible for Medicaid. Unless you're disabled and you're collecting supplemental security income disability, that would come with Medicaid. But for an able-bodied adult, no child, no dependents, there's no Medicaid. And for that single parent with one child, $600 per month or less would qualify for Medicaid. So we're not talking about a program that's really bailing out people who, by the way, should be getting insurance through their workplace, right? That's the way that historically people have gotten insurance in this country. And again, if they don't have insurance, then they're showing up at Jackson, which is really the safety net hospital, and they're bearing the burden. And we have to make sure that Jackson can provide for that indigent care. And again, if they're uninsured, then they're not getting preventive care, and the care that they are getting is more expensive.
And we understand that because you go into ER versus a regular doctor.
Exactly.
Right? So there's a young lady, her name is Dr. Tina Carroll Smith.
Yes, I know her.
Scott. 17 years ago, she gave up a lucrative practice. She was working on Bal Harbour. She came to South Miami to provide service for the underserved.
Yes.
It's people like her that makes me want to do better, that she was willing to give up this over here so she could do the things that she was passionate about. The clinic might be needing some help.
Oh, okay.
So maybe the county could look into that. It is a vital organization, and you realize she's not just a doctor. She's the glue that helps keep those families together.
She also fought, and we worked with her to get vaccine before it was readily available. We partnered with her on that. She's an extraordinary caregiver and person and has made a huge difference.
She is my unsung hero. So whenever I get a chance, I try to assist.
Yes.
in so
Yes.
many ways, and most of them she's not aware of. But I think this is something that needs to be taken care of. Our
Mhm.
office is just a few blocks in there, and I see the difference it makes. And so here's this role model for these kids that are there, and I think she could use some help. So let's talk about, we've got an election for sheriff that's coming up, first time in 60 years, I think.
Yes.
So in Broward County, there's a sheriff up there.
Yes.
Here, we call him the director, but
Yes.
will become the sheriff. What is the difference between being the director and being the sheriff, other than a name?
Well, so right now in our charter, the sheriff is, I'm the sheriff. Just to be very clear, I'm the sheriff and I delegate my duties to the director of the police department. In our case, it's Freddie Ramirez, who is a veteran cop. He worked his way up the ranks. That's the only career he's ever had. And he rose through the ranks to become director, and he's done a fabulous job. He also is my chief of public safety. So he doesn't only oversee police, but also fire and emergency management. So he's really quite the guy. And he has declared that he is running for sheriff. I think he will be exemplary in that role for sure. I noticed that there was an article in your community newspaper that just came out that talked about what are some of the ideal qualities of a sheriff. I thought it was very well done. Congratulations to Grant for that nice article. And it talked about the experience, and it talked about being nonpartisan, even though this is a partisan post. You know, they pulled a fast one on us. There was a constitutional reform commission every 20 years. They put a bunch of things on the ballot, including make an elected sheriff. Basically, they were targeting us. And then they put it on the same item. They bundled items with, should we continue to have a veteran affairs department? So people voted yes, we should have a veteran affairs department, and yes, we should have an elected sheriff. It was not passed by the 60% required in Miami-Dade County, even though really it was about us, but it was passed statewide because people didn't really understand or know or matter, except for they wanted a veteran affairs office, and the rest of the state does have an elected sheriff. But our experience here was not good. There was corruption, and so the public voted to make it an appointed back then.
1960.
1960. So it's worked very well. We've had excellent community relations. Our police department is, I would say, definitely at the forefront of police departments anywhere. Our crime is down. We're very community engaged. So it's a shame to have to change it up. But God willing, we'll elect a good sheriff, and that person will work collaboratively with the rest of county government.
That's terrific. Before I forget, I did want to touch on the Kendall Parkway,
Yes.
which is, was at many of those meetings for the people in Kendall. People in Kendall are desperate
Yeah.
to have something additional for them.
Yes, yes.
What does the next 5 years look like concerning that?
Well, so the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority, which was created by the county, has once again been eliminated by the state legislature. This has been a kind of very frustrating dance that has gone on for quite a few years. It is part of the court decision, hopefully this summer, to finally determine whether the state can do that, preempt local authority and create its own enterprise that would be dominated by state appointees rather than local appointees. But the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority had as a priority the building of the Kendall Parkway. Now, just for full disclosure, I voted against it. I didn't support it when I was a commissioner. It was voted by the majority, and it was approved all the way on appeal to the state level. The concerns that I have about that are it'll be an empty promise, because the traffic studies show that it would save something like, 6 minutes, 3 minutes each way. It was really not a significant savings. And also, the roadway as it's configured, proposed to be configured, goes across some very environmentally sensitive lands and what's called the Bird Road Basin that is required for Everglades restoration, so it creates a risk. Basically, we know what's called induced traffic. Once you create a new road, it fills right back up again. So I'm saying transit, transit, transit. We, have these new express buses that go out to Kendall. We're looking again at a Flagler Street east-west corridor. That will be really important. They're looking again at a CSX railroad track that would go along the fringe of the airport, at least east-west. So a lot of different opportunities. But I guess what I'm saying to you is I do not know what the fate of that road is, given the attacks on the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority.
Next, down south, there's always the question of how close should a building be to the urban development boundary line. I know there's a case that the state sent it back or they canceled it. What's the latest on that?
We talked about all of these things at the county commission meeting today. I have to tell you, we talked about not 836, but we did talk about some of your other topics, Covanta, and now we're talking about
the big development.
The big development. Yes, it's called Aligned, and it would be a warehouse district. And it was said that warehouses are in big demand. We're not sure in how big demand they are, but we really think that what that was about is land flipping, purchasing it at a lower price and then turning it over for a range of purposes, not necessarily in the original application. But again, it's on a piece of land that is highly vulnerable for polluting the bay and affecting our
you
water supply.
even though
I vetoed it.
vetoed
So
it,
it was
and then-
passed. I vetoed it, and the Board of County Commissioners at the time overrode my veto. And okay, but now we have a new commission, and it was at the end of that last commission's tenure. I don't believe that this current board would have approved that application. So a number of things have happened since then. There is an appeal by those who oppose it, so that has gone forward. There was a lawsuit that was filed to allow it to go forward, and there is, there are some hopes that it might come back to the current commission for some reconsideration.
And-
So I would just say, stay tuned.
Okay. And let's stay tuned with Calusa Golf Course.
Okay.
Well, you have to give it to Amanda Prieto and her team, who's persistent and has actually created has documented this. And I suggested her, you need to do videos and a book
Yes.
and put this together from the start and how you kept track of this,
Yes.
because it's really extraordinary what happened, which was, people that don't know, the golf course, which was abandoned. And then when you have abandoned property, all types of critters go on it, including state protected birds.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with that?
So I, for the record, as a commissioner, voted against that development.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to be clear about that. When I was mayor, it passed and moved forward. And then these appeals were made. And of course, we were very clear. If there's endangered species, then they have to be protected. So we would be very diligent, and our county departments were very diligent and going out and inspecting and documenting during breeding season and making sure that we did not endanger any of the protected species. There are other birds that are lovely but not endangered, and we really don't have jurisdiction to protect those. So as it happened, it was documented that there were species that needed to be protected. And so my recall is that the developer is coming back with a modified plan. And in the meantime, of course, the sanctuary, if you will, is being protected. There were concerns about lawn mowing in the area, disturbing the nests, and it was reached out to the company, and they agreed. I guess it was FPL that was maintaining the property, and they agreed to back off and create a bigger buffer, even though they weren't really required to do that, but that was very good thing that they did.
So how do you, and we have about a minute left, excuse me, how do you process being pulled in all different directions at the same moment sometimes?
Yeah,
and then plus
yeah.
where you are, right, and you feel that. How do you process that?
Well, it's really challenging, I must say. It feels like being Solomon sometimes, you know, how you split the baby. But I do try very hard to listen to all sides. Sometimes there's more than two sides of a situation, and try my very best to bring people to some shared understanding. So I take my time with these decisions and try to engage the community as much as possible.
It has been a pleasure, Mayor,
Thank you.
and I'm a big fan of yours, sorry. So keep doing what you're doing, caring about people and taking care of them, and continued success to
Thank you, Michael.
folks. Again, thanks for joining us, and take care of yourself. Have a good day.